My job is a bit to do research on Bitcoin mining, energy consumption and sustainability, and to maybe go a bit against the false narrative that you often have in media nowadays, that Bitcoin is spoiling the ocean, that Bitcoin is bad for the environment. Of course, it consumes a lot of energy, but there's more to Bitcoin mining, which can be very positive for the environment, or at least not harmful for the environment. And that's what I'm mainly looking at. That's my job.
Today we're talking to Dr. Jan Wüstenfeld. He's an economist, an on-chain analyst, and now he's more involved into research about Bitcoin mining, right?
Yes. First of all, thanks for having me. So right now, I started mostly in Bitcoin research, so in economics and finance. Did also my PhD there, finished this year. And right now I'm working for a company in Paris, Millennium Green Tech, where I'm basically doing research around Bitcoin mining, energy and sustainability. Basically at the company we're offering something around Bitcoin mining, a hash rate, a very innovative product. And my job is a bit to do research on Bitcoin mining, energy consumption and sustainability, to maybe go a bit against the false narrative that you often have in media nowadays, that Bitcoin is spoiling the ocean, that Bitcoin is bad for the environment. Of course, it consumes a lot of energy, but there's more to Bitcoin mining, which can be very positive for the environment, or at least not harmful for the environment. And that's what I'm mainly looking at. That's my job, to look at this and to bring out the positive aspects or the aspects of Bitcoin mining.
So does Bitcoin consume more electricity than that part of the banking system that it could potentially replace?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't have the numbers right now, so I don't want to lie, or to say something wrong. But I think the banking system right now consumes a lot of energy. I mean, all the infrastructure, etc., requires a substantial amount of energy. But I generally don't think that's like the problem or the narrative we should be going down. It's more the narrative around, is the energy consumption of Bitcoin itself bad, and how much, for example, of the energy consumed of Bitcoin mining is green? Is it helping green energy projects, investments, etc.? I think it's better to go around the positive aspects of Bitcoin mining rather than showing like, okay, banking consumes a lot of energy, etc. So I think there's a lot more to tell about all the positive things around Bitcoin.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, if you look at electricity sources and off-grid versus grid dependency, then these kind of questions are probably misleading. But these comparisons are often made like Bitcoin mining consumes more electricity than the whole of Norway or something. But I think air conditioners consume 10 times more electricity than Bitcoin mining. But that's not really the question you should be asked, because the Bitcoin mining ability to be like grid independent, location independent, time flexible, makes the really good stabilizer for the grid, and also support to expand sustainable energy, right? To what extent is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, right now we have the aim of our economy is to transition to like green energy economies. So that means more wind energy, more solar energy, etc. But what is an issue with these sources? Like, they're fluctuating depending on if there's wind, sun, etc. So it's not like the traditional energy sources where you maybe can power up a gas plant when demand rises, or when demand falls, you can power it down. It's not that easy with renewable energy sources. So Bitcoin mining is like a source of energy demand that could be something that could be used for flexible demand response. Of course, Bitcoin miners need to be up and running for a certain amount of time. So it could be particularly good for base demand. So let's say if we want to power the Netherlands with renewable energies, what do you have to do? You basically have a choice in using also traditional energy sources, battery storages, which are not that much available yet. Hopefully in the future more. So basically, you have to build up more energy generation capacity than maybe is needed during certain times of the day. And then you can have a base demand of Bitcoin miners. Because if Bitcoin miners only would be for the peak demand, then you would have very low uptimes of Bitcoin miners and you have hardware costs, etc., which need to be covered. So I see it more as a flexible or as a base load demand, base demand for these renewable energy sources. And a very good example we are already seeing now is, for example, in Africa, very like you have the rural areas where a lot of areas are not electrified yet as much. And one solution is to set up microgrids that are, for example, using hydropower. But the issue right now is that let's say you want to set up a hydro dam, so you have a lot of upfront investment, and you already have to build it up for a capacity for demand that might occur in 5-6 years, because maybe in the beginning demand is not that high because it's just used for light, charging phones, TV, and with time and development, maybe people will be putting up fridges or use it for cooking, etc. But that poses a big issue for investors because it's not an economically viable investment in many instances. So right now it relies on external financing, like development financing, and yeah, those kind of financing sources are in a sense limited. So you can't really expand that because it's always better if it makes economic sense. And what we right now have, for example, the biggest ones are gridless. They're doing an amazing job in Africa right now, basically putting Bitcoin mining containers next to these hydro facilities and saying them, okay, we take up all the energy that is not consumed by the local communities. And once demand starts to rise over time, we can shut down our Bitcoin miners and go somewhere else. So that's basically giving the energy generator an income source and makes for the first time for many projects, microgrid projects, makes them economically viable, and it's really good for the plant provider because he can sell his energy that otherwise would have been not used. Then you have the Bitcoin mining provider. Of course, they earn Bitcoin. But at the same time, it's also great for consumers because this additional demand helps the energy provider to lower the electricity costs. So the electricity will also get cheaper for local communities. And what we are seeing with Gridless, they also, for example, now have additional money to implement additional grid lines to connect, for example, even another village 1 kilometer away from the facility, which otherwise would have maybe happened in a couple of years or wouldn't have happened at all because there was no financial means. So that's a great way to electrify. So it's a social aspect, but it's also good because it drives renewable energy expansion, and you can, for example, replace generators, etc., or cooking stoves, which emit CO2, which yeah has emissions, but it's also maybe harmful for people if they breathe in the fumes from fire every day. So
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So there are several solutions, as you said. with excess energy, with subsidizing heating, subsidizing expansion of renewable energy. So it's kind of like the perfect solution we've been waiting for. But in politics, you still hear that it's like really bad for the environment. Is there a shift right now, or what does have to happen that there's just also a shift in the mainstream narrative?
We're seeing slowly a shift in narratives, and that's thanks to a lot of guys putting in the work. For example, Daniel Batten and other researchers just putting out, like basically showing people also scientifically that maybe emissions are not as high as previously claimed, and showing how those projects work. And so yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done, and that's one of like part of my job also to help shift that narrative, of course, with facts and data. So we're not going to make up any stories. It's more about showing the actual potential of Bitcoin mining in all these scenarios like grid balancing, etc., what we've mentioned. So yeah, we're already starting to see a positive shift due to people really putting in the work and trying to explain to journalists, policymakers, etc., what are the potentials and how does it work. So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, but it's almost as if it's too good to be true. Aren't there any downsides, or what do you think?
I mean, of course, still in the end, we still have Bitcoin miners that, of course, also run on non-renewable energy sources naturally. I mean, they go where energy is cheap, which usually is renewables, but of course, in some areas you might have still coal, energy, etc. But we are also doing that. I mean, if you use energy from the electricity grid for whatever purpose, even then, not everything is renewable. And of course, we have to, in many areas, still experiment also. I mentioned grid balancing and uptime. Under which scenarios does it make economic sense for a Bitcoin miner to work with these programs? And so it's not going to work in every scenario. It's just one piece in. It's a tiny piece in being able to help our green energy transition. In my mind, ideally at some point, for example, grid balancing, etc., battery storage, etc., should get much better. And if that's replacing, if right now we would say, okay, Bitcoin miners are a good solution there, but if in the end we find a solution where we can say, well, we have batteries, so we can store energy when a lot is available, but not a lot of demand, I would say perfect. And then Bitcoin miners are moving to even more specific use cases at the fringes of energy production. And so we have yet to see in many areas where Bitcoin miners are going to move and what is going to happen.
Yeah. Great. I have another question. It's a bit different topic. The term scarcity is being thrown around a lot in with regards to Bitcoin. That is this great feature of Bitcoin. But is scarcity not? Does it not imply a pressure to act, like FOMO, and is therefore maybe not a good term to objectively describe what Bitcoin is? What do you think?
I'm not sure I 100% understand the question, but
yeah. It's just Bitcoiners talk a lot about scarcity. You hear Michael Saylor saying it. You hear Jack Mallers saying it. A lot of Bitcoiners on Bitcoin conference talk about this great feature of Bitcoin, which is scarcity. But isn't it, imply a pressure to act, or is not a good objective term to describe what Bitcoin is? Or in other words, is scarcity a fundamental characteristic of Bitcoin, or is it a symptom of the characteristics of Bitcoin?
That's a good question. I would say, I mean, scarcity is a very important factor for Bitcoin, at least for the narratives you have nowadays. So it's it's a very relevant factor, at least in driving demand by Bitcoiners, retail, but also nowadays the big institutional money. I mean, if you look at BlackRock and their reports, they start comparing Bitcoin to gold, and that's basically because of the characteristics of Bitcoin. It's a supply schedule, so that we are slowly approaching the 21 million Bitcoin. So yeah, I think for the adoption right now, it's a very important factor in driving people towards Bitcoin, and as you said, maybe even instill FOMO in people. I mean, one would expect it to be much bigger, but I think right now it's just not many people have realized or understood the characteristics of Bitcoin. Or because if more people understood that, we would be at a way different stage right now regarding Bitcoin price and Bitcoin adoption.
So you're a Bitcoin on-chain analyst as well, right? And provided it will continue to grow as it does, and I mean ETFs were a big topic, and now options are allowed. How scarce is Bitcoin actually, and what can it do to the price potentially? Of course, it's very speculative, but you as an on-chain analyst maybe have some good input here.
I mean, of course, we're seeing more and more Bitcoin moving into the hands of, let's say, hardcore hodlers or people that start to see, okay, I'm just holding it for the next 10 years, 20 years, or even longer. But that doesn't mean that there's not some liquidity around Bitcoin. I mean, many people, if you go on Twitter right now, many people are like, no, Bitcoin should have been already at 100K right now with demand, etc. And I think what people don't realize, there's still enough people maybe willing to sell Bitcoin and not seeing Bitcoin as like the store of value, what maybe you and I are seeing it as, but more as a speculative asset. I mean, we're seeing that always when there's some geopolitical events, short term, at least price goes down. We can see in the data now, BlackRock has also shared data that like 60 days afterwards in the most recent events, Bitcoin has performed very well. So apparently some more people then see it as a good value proposition. But still there are people just seeing it as a short-term speculation. And I think we're also going to see that still in the future.
Are options a factor that make it or keep it speculative as it is right now?
I won't need to think more about it, but I think it's something, that can. But I think it's going to more rather change the market, how it works. But I'm not sure if it's in the end going to keep it speculative or not. I think ultimately that will more depend on the kind of people and investors that are starting to enter the market. And if we are starting to see more and more the narrative of Bitcoin being digital gold or even better than gold take hold, and at least that seems to be what BlackRock is pushing right now as a narrative. I think we might also see more and more people and more investors believing in the long-term proposition. But of course, right now, what you're seeing with the financialization, if you want to call it that way, with ETFs, we're seeing a set of investors entering the market that just see it as another play next to stocks, etc. So naturally, for example, if stocks are going down, portfolio rebalancing is going to happen. So naturally, also Bitcoin has to be sold off. And in those instances, most likely right now, Bitcoin is more regarded at the higher end of the risk curve. So it's a high risk asset. So it's going to be the first one that's going to be sold, and then the stocks, etc. So yeah, that's a factor we're seeing right now. We're seeing if you look at stocks and Bitcoin, we're seeing the correlations we've seen correlations rising between the S&P 500, for example, and Bitcoin price. It's still not extremely high, but correlation has been rising since ETFs have been established.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.